We're heading into one of the most consequential midterm elections in modern American history. Control of Congress is on the line. The balance of executive power is under scrutiny, and debates about election integrity, media influence, and federal authority are intensifying. Both parties say democracy itself is at stake. Both sides believe the system is under pressure, and both are preparing for a fight. Today, we break down what's happening, what's legal, what's possible, and what's politically realistic as November approaches. Let us start with the political feedback loop. Midterms historically serve as a referendum on the sitting president. If approval ratings slip, congressional resistance rises. Party unity gets tested. Executive action often increases. That dynamic creates what political scientists call a feedback loop. That is, we see political vulnerability leads to institutional pushback, which results in stronger executive posture, which then leads to more polarization in the country. We're seeing that dynamic now. On issues ranging from immigration enforcement to trade policy to federal investigations, tensions between federal authority, state governments, and Congress are growing sharper. The question is not whether that's happening, it's how far it goes. But we need to address the elephant in the room, which is the information environment of today. One of the biggest structural differences in 2026 versus a decade ago is the media ecosystem. The information landscape now includes traditional broadcast networks, cable news, independent digital media, social media platforms, algorithm-driven news feeds. Presidents today can communicate directly with tens of millions of voters instantly. Critics argue this centralizes influence. Supporters argue it democratizes communication. Either way, it changes campaign dynamics dramatically. Narratives move faster. Outrage spreads quicker. Fact-checking competes with virality. And in midterms, where turnout and perception matter enormously, that environment becomes decisive. Another issue drawing attention: redistricting and structural levers. Redistricting happens primarily at the state level. Both parties use it when they can. Courts intervene when maps violate federal standards. Right now, some states are attempting new maps. Others are challenging maps in court. Supreme Court rulings on voting law could shape outcomes. Realistically, most analysts estimate redistricting adjustments may shift only a handful of seats, unless a major legal ruling dramatically changes the playing field. Another flashpoint: election oversight. That is, federal investigations and election integrity. The Department of Justice has sought voter roll data in multiple states. Some states have complied, others have resisted. Supporters of these efforts say federal oversight protects election integrity. Data analysis can detect inconsistencies. Uniform standards strengthen trust. Critics argue states control elections constitutionally. Federal involvement risks politicization. Data demands could intimidate local administrators. This tension between state authority and federal power has existed since the founding of the country. But in high polarization environments, it becomes more volatile. A particularly controversial idea gaining discussion is whether elections should be more nationalized. Some argue federal standards would prevent uneven enforcement. Uniform ID requirements increase confidence. Central oversight reduces fraud risk. Others warn elections are constitutionally state-run. Centralization risks executive overreach. Concentrated control weakens checks and balances. It is important to note, major changes to election administration would require congressional approval and face immediate legal scrutiny. There's also debate about executive emergency powers. What's realistic? Under American law, presidents can declare national emergencies for specific purposes. However, courts can review those declarations. Congress can terminate them. Implementation depends on agencies and state cooperation. In extreme scenarios, such as security threats or cyber interference, federal authorities can increase involvement. But deploying emergency powers domestically in the context of elections would trigger intense legal and political resistance. Historically, institutions push back strongly when boundaries are tested. So, what is most likely? Let's separate high probability from low probability scenarios. Most likely? Intense political rhetoric. legal challenges before and after voting, close races leading to recounts, competing media narratives. Less likely but possible, prolonged certification disputes, court battles reaching the Supreme Court, delayed final results in key districts. Highly unlikely, suspension of elections, long-term federal seizure of election systems, breakdown of constitutional transfer processes. America's institutions are strained, but historically resilient. So, what actually determines the outcome? Despite the noise, 3 factors decide midterms. 1. Turnout. 2. Economic sentiment. 3. Independent voters. Structural maneuvers matter at the margins. But voter motivation remains the core variable. The 2026 midterms won't just decide seats in Congress. They'll test institutional resilience, federal-state boundaries, public trust in elections. The limits of executive authority. Expect litigation, expect controversy, expect rhetoric on all sides, but also expect, as history repeatedly shows, that the constitutional framework will be tested, challenged, and defended in real time. November won't just be an election, it will be a stress test. And we'll be watching every step of it,